Chapter 10. The conference room on the 8th floor was designed to impress without trying too hard. Glass walls, muted lighting, polished steel, and a long table that reflected faces like a shallow mirror. San Francisco stretched behind it all, fog curling lazily over the bay, the city distant and unreal, as if it belonged to another life entirely. Alexander sat halfway down the table, hands folded, spine straight. He had learned long ago that posture mattered in rooms like this. People decided who you were before you spoke. The department heads filtered in one by one. The room was filled with low conversations, restrained laughter. Someone poured coffee while someone else adjusted a projector cable. Everything looked normal. It wasn't. The door finally closed. The room settled. "Thank you for making the time," the division head began. "Today's meeting is about an external collaboration opportunity that comes with significant backing." A pause carefully placed. "We're hosting representatives from a consulting and strategic advisory group with deep international reach." Alexandra's gaze stayed neutral. He had heard this language before. Governments didn't announce themselves as governments anymore. They came hidden in phrases like these. The door opened again. A man entered first. Rees Remen didn't rush. He didn't smile. He moved with the calm certainty of someone accustomed to being obeyed without asking. Mid-50s, tailored charcoal suit, immaculate shoes. His face was composed, unreadable but not cold, a man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. "This is Mr. Rees Remen," the division head said. "Senior partner and regional director." Rees nodded once, acknowledging the room as a whole, not any individual in it. "Good morning," he said. His voice was smooth, measured. No accent you could place easily. "I appreciate your openness to collaboration." Then, without introduction, she walked in. Sarah Khalid. Alexandra's breath stalled before he realized it had. She wore a dark blazer, simple blouse, hair pulled back neatly. Nothing dramatic, nothing overt. But she carried herself differently than the others. Lighter, almost relaxed, like she wasn't stepping into a room of executives but passing through a familiar space. Her eyes found Alexander immediately with recognition, a look that lasted half a second too long. His fingers tightened against each other beneath the table. No, he thought. "It can't be." Rees gestured slightly. "This is Sarah Khalid, lead consultant on the engagement." Sarah inclined her head politely, professional smile in place. But her gaze flicked back to Alexander again, brief and deliberate. She remembered him, and worse, she knew he was here. The meeting moved forward. Countless slides appeared on the screen with abstract diagrams, market projections, neutral language layered over something far more aggressive. Rees spoke in the polished language about secure data ecosystems, resilient AI frameworks, and cross-border infrastructure partnerships. Each phrase sounded clean, harmless, even progressive, but beneath the layers of jargon, Alexander could hear what was being carefully avoided. Every diagram hinted at it. Every word was shaped around control. It was a vocabulary designed to hide sharp edges, to make power sound like efficiency and intrusion sound like collaboration. But Alexander heard it anyway. This collaboration, Rees continued, would require a trusted technical lead, someone with deep architectural understanding, someone discreet. Alexander felt Sarah's attention shift towards him again, subtle but clear. The division head glanced down the table. "Doctor Varen has been recommended." A murmur of agreement followed. Alexander acquiesced once, automatically. His mind was elsewhere now, replaying the plane, Sarah's questions, the way things unfolded. The meeting wrapped up efficiently. Rees lingered only long enough to establish dominance, then left the room with finality associated with people like him. People began to stand, chairs sliding back. Alexander gathered his tablet and stood, realizing Sarah was already behind him. "I was hoping we'd finally meet properly," she said lightly, falling into step beside him as he walked down the corridor. He didn't stop. "What is this about?" They passed glass-walled offices, engineers at work, whiteboards filled with code. She followed him anyway. "You've been busy," she continued. He stopped and turned. "Say what you came to say." Sarah studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned slightly closer, not in a threatening but intentional way. "I can help you bring Max home." The world narrowed. Alexander felt the blood rush to his ears. How do you know his name? She didn't answer directly. I have photographs. His heart pounded hard. If this is a bluff, it's not. Her voice softened. He's safe for now. Alexander stepped back as if struck. What are you talking about? What do you mean safe? Sarah held his gaze. I don't think you want to talk about something like that here. There was silence between them for a moment. You want something, he said. Yes, he laughed once sharp. Of course you do. She gestured subtly toward the lab doors. Not here, not with your systems listening. His stomach dropped. Alexander felt the weight of the knowledge settle into place. The surveillance, the access attempts, the timing, all planned, conscious, and demanding. This was never about consulting, he said quietly. She stepped back, professional mask returning. Call me or don't. But understand this, no one else in your world has real information about your son. She turned and walked away. Alexander stood alone in the corridor, heart pounding, the hum of servers suddenly louder. Someone had finally offered him some certainty about Max, and certainty, he knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. The cafe Sarah chose was secluded in the way expensive places often were, no music loud enough to intrude, no tables close enough to overhear. It sat just off Market Street, tucked between glass offices and a bookstore that had survived out of stubbornness rather than profit. A place where conversations were meant to dissolve into background noise. Alexander arrived early. He chose a seat with his back to the wall, eyes tracking the entrance, hands wrapped tightly around a cup he hadn't yet touched. He had replayed the decision to come here at least a dozen times on the walk over, and each time he had reached the same conclusion. He couldn't afford not to. Sarah arrived exactly on time. She didn't rush. She didn't scan the room. She walked in as though she belonged there, coat draped neatly over one arm, expression calm, composed, too composed for someone about to discuss something illegal, dangerous, and irreversible. She spotted him immediately. Dr. Varenne, she said, sliding into the chair across from him without waiting for permission. Thank you for coming. You said you had proof, Alexander replied. No greeting, no pleasantries. If this is another attempt to scare me, she opened her bag and placed her phone face down on the table. No threats, she said evenly. I have information for you. She turned the phone toward him and unlocked it. The first image filled the screen, Max. Alexandra's breath caught so sharply it hurt. The photo was recent. He could tell by Max's haircut, by the jacket he was wearing, a blue one Alexander didn't recognize. Max stood beside a window, sunlight hitting the side of his face, his expression distracted, half smiling at something outside the frame. Alexander reached for the phone, then stopped himself, fingers trembling. Where did you get this? He demanded. Almaty, Sarah said. Hotel conference lounge, almost 2 weeks ago. She swiped and another image popped up where Max was sitting at a small table, coloring. Layla just visible in the background, speaking to someone out of frame. Alexander swallowed hard. How do you know her? Why are you watching her? Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sipped her coffee, eyes never leaving his. Layla works with my organization, she said at last. In Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, sometimes elsewhere. Alexandra's jaw tightened. He leaned forward. Then say it clearly. Why are you involved with her? Sarah met his gaze. Because she's useful and because she's careless. Alexander felt something cold settle in his chest. You've seen my son, he said quietly. Yes. How often? More than once. His hands clenched beneath the table. And you're telling me this now because legal routes won't bring him back, Sarah interrupted calmly. And you know that. He looked away, jaw working. Layla didn't take Max impulsively, Sarah continued. She planned it. She positioned herself where the system would protect her. She travels with him because it keeps him close and because it limits your ability to intervene. Alexander snapped his gaze back to her. Intervene how? Sarah tilted her head slightly. You've thought about it. He didn't answer. I can help you take him, she said. The word landed between them like a live wire. Alexander stiffened. You're talking about kidnapping. I'm talking about retrieval, Sarah corrected. There's a difference when the law has already failed. He shook his head sharply. You don't understand. I understand exactly, she said. I know where she stays. I know her travel windows. I know when Max is with her and when he's left with assistance. I know which airports don't ask questions if the right paperwork is prepared. She leaned back slightly, voice steady, and I know how to make sure you disappear afterward. Alexander stared at her. You're insane, maybe, she allowed, but I'm also the only person sitting across from you who has actually seen your child in the last month. That silenced him. She watched his face closely now, assessing. You don't trust me, she said. No, Alexander replied. I don't. You shouldn't, she agreed. Trust is inefficient, he laughed once, humorless. Then why would I listen to you? Because I'm offering you a way out, Sarah said softly. And because part of you already knows you're running out of options. Alexander leaned back slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. You're lying about something, he said. Her lips curved faintly. Of course I am. About what? She didn't answer. Instead, she slid the phone back toward him, opening a final image. Max asleep on a plane seat, head tilted against Layla's shoulder. Alexander went silent. He's with her most of the time, Sarah said. She doesn't trust anyone else. Alexandra's voice was barely audible. Why are you helping me? Sarah studied him for a long moment, then leaned in just enough that only he could hear. Because I want something you have, she said, and because I think you're going to give it to me eventually. What? He demanded. She smiled, slow and unreadable. Not today. He stiffened. Then this conversation is over. No, Sarah said gently, it's just beginning. She stood, gathering her coat. Think about it, about what you're willing to lose and what you're willing to become. She paused, then added quietly, and about how much longer Max can wait. She walked out without looking back. Alexander remained seated, staring at the empty chair across from him, heaviness settling in. The thought formed clearly, terrifying in its precision. If he accepted her help, there would be no clean way back, and yet, he remembered Max's face on the screen again. He already knew how this would end. Alexander sat alone long after the cafe had emptied, the chair across from him still angled as if Sarah might return at any moment. The city moved on outside, but everything around him felt distant, unreal. He kept replaying the images on her phone, the way Max's face had looked in unguarded moments, proof of life delivered with surgical precision. Legal routes had failed him, courts had delayed him, police had dismissed him, and now a stranger had placed the unthinkable in his hands and called it an option. He hated how quickly his mind had begun to work through it, not emotionally, but practically. Timing, access, risk, the realization unsettled him more than fear ever had. He wasn't asking whether it was wrong anymore, he was asking whether it would work. By the time he left the cafe, the sky had darkened into that deep blue San Francisco held onto just before night. He walked without direction for several blocks, phone clenched in his hand, feeling the weight of the choice pressing against his chest. Sarah had lied, he was sure of it, but not about Max. That was the danger, truth mixed with omission. He knew that pattern too well, he had used it himself in other contexts. Back in his house, he locked the door, checked the windows, then sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. He thought of Absol, of his restraint, his careful advice, his insistence on patience, and yet patience had brought him here to this moment. He picked up the phone and dialed Absol's number, heart pounding harder with each ring. When the line connected, Alexander spoke quickly, as if stopping might undo him. He told him about the meeting at the company, about Rees Remen and the sudden collaboration, about Sarah's reappearance and her access to Layla. He described the cafe, the photos, the offer made in careful words that avoided saying too much even now. He didn't frame it as a plan, he framed it as a threat. As a crossroads he hadn't chosen but was being pushed toward. I don't trust her, Alexander said finally, voice tight, but she knows things she shouldn't. And she's close enough to Max to prove it. He fell silent then, listening to Absol breathe on the other end of the line, waiting for a response that didn't come yet. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion washing over him in waves. I don't know what to do anymore, he admitted quietly. Every legal door is closed. And now this has followed me home too. He ended the call soon after, promising to talk again, but the unease remained, heavier than before. As he set the phone down, Alexander understood one thing with unsettling clarity. Whatever decision he made next would change the shape of his life forever.